In this video, we're going to talk about how auditing works on AWS and what tools you can use to keep an eye on your environment. The goal is to help you continuously audit your AWS resources to follow security best practices and always meet compliance requirements. To get started, let's compare how auditing typically looks on-premises versus in the cloud, and then we'll connect that to the AWS services that can help you. In traditional on-premises environments, security and compliance checks often happen in big, infrequent cycles, maybe once or twice a year. In the cloud, things are much more dynamic. Resources are created, changed, and destroyed all the time. Your auditing mindset needs to be continuous instead of occasional. On AWS, auditing usually means answering questions like, are my resources configured securely? Do my configurations match my internal policies or external regulations? And can I prove this to an internal or external auditor if I need to? And answering to these questions are very critical. In our previous videos, we talked about AWS Trusted Advisor that acts as a built-in consultant that regularly checks your AWS account against a set of best practices. We said that it looks at areas such as cost optimization, performance, fault tolerance, and security. And for example, it can tell you if you have idle resources that you're paying but not using, or if you have security groups that are too open. Now that we've set the stage and mentioned Trusted Advisor, let's zoom in on specific areas you typically want to audit in an AWS environment. Encryption, both in transit and at rest. Encryption at rest is about data stored on disks like in S3 buckets, EBS volumes, or databases. You want to make sure sensitive data is always encrypted. Encryption in transit is about data moving over the network, like API calls, web traffic, or database connections. Here, you want to make sure that all the traffic uses HTTPS or other secure protocols so nobody can easily listen in. The other one is CloudTrail log protection. CloudTrail records who did what in your AWS account. These logs are very important for audits. You want to make sure that S3 buckets storing those logs are not public and are hard to delete or change, and ideally use controls like versioning so your audit trail is complete and trustworthy. The next thing is unnecessary public access. This includes things like public S3 buckets, security groups that allow inbound traffic from anywhere, or admin interfaces exposed to the internet. You can check whether they really need to be public, or if not, you lock them down. The next thing is configuration standards. Many organizations define a baseline configuration for things like EC2 instances, databases, or storage. For example, you might require certain tags on every EC2 instances or block specific ports. Auditing means checking that resources follow these rules and quickly spotting anything that doesn't. The next area is credentials and access control. This is about IAM users, roles, and policies. Always remember that you aim for least privilege. You can check things like, are there IAM users without MFA? Are there old access keys that haven't been rotated? Does any role or user have wildcard permission that they don't really need? Once you know that what you need to look at, the next question is, how do you actually audit all of these at scale without doing it manually? To do all of these efficiently across many accounts and regions, of course you don't want to manually click through the console every day. This is where one of the core auditing services comes in, AWS Config. You can think of AWS Config as the configuration recorder and checker of your AWS environment. AWS Config continuously records the configuration of supported resources in your account and keeps a history of how these configurations change. On top of that, it can evaluate those configurations against a set of rules and mark each resource as compliant or non-compliant against those rules. It has built-in managed rules for common checks like S3 buckets must not be public or EBS volumes must be encrypted, and then you can write your own custom rules if you have a specific internal policies. Config stores configuration snapshots and compliance status so you can go back in time and see what changed and when. Now, one important note that you should pay attention to is config will detect and flag non-compliant resources, but it does not block or prevent those changes. If you want to really actually stop someone from creating or modifying a resource in a certain way, that's where you use IAM permissions and in larger setups, service control policies in AWS organizations. To make this more concrete, imagine a simple scenario. You have a rule that says no security group should be allowed for SSH for port 22 from the entire internet. You can create a config rule to check all the security groups, and if any of them allow 000/0 on port 22, config will mark those groups as non-compliant and can send you a notification. So config gives you continuous visibility into configuration compliance, but audit teams often need more than that. They need structured evidence and formal reports in a specific format. This is where AWS Audit Manager comes in. AWS Audit Manager helps you collect evidence from services like AWS Config, CloudTrail, and others, and organize that evidence against a specific compliance or best practices framework. It has many pre-built frameworks that you can start from, such as PCI DSS, the NIST cybersecurity framework, or general AWS operational best practices. Each framework comes with a set of controls, and Audit Manager maps data from AWS services to those controls. You can also create custom frameworks as you wish if your organization follows its own internal standards as well. But the thing they should remember is Audit Manager automatically collects the required data in the background. When you're ready, you can generate a report for internal review or for external stakeholders. So AWS Config is mainly about detecting and tracking configuration compliance, and Audit Manager is about organizing that evidence and reporting against specific frameworks. Beyond these two, there's also a tool that helps you step back and look at workloads from a broader architectural point of view, and that's AWS Well-Architected Tool. It is the last service that we want to cover in this video, and the important thing that you should know about this service is it helps you review your workloads against the AWS Well-Architected framework. AWS Well-Architected framework is built around 6 pillars that we already covered in another video: operational excellence, security, reliability, performance efficiency, cost optimization, and sustainability. You answer questions about your workload, and the tool guides you through these best practices. It highlights potential risk or areas for improvement and gives you recommended actions you can take to bring your architecture closer to those best practices. Okay, let's summarize what we covered in this video and the big picture of auditing and best practices checking on AWS. AWS Config is the backbone service for configuration auditing. It tracks your resource configurations over time, evaluates them against the rules, and marks resources as compliant or non-compliant based on the rules. AWS Audit Manager, on the other hand, builds on top of that. It organizes evidence and generates reports aligned to compliance frameworks or your own internal standards. AWS Trusted Advisor gives you high-level best practices, checks across your account in areas like cost, performance, fault tolerance, and security. And the AWS Well-Architected Tool helps you look at the big picture. It lets you evaluate entire workloads at the architecture level using the 6 well-architected pillars. Use AWS Config for continuous configuration auditing and compliance checks. Use AWS Audit Manager to centralize audience evidence and generate reports. Use Trusted Advisor and Well-Architected Tool for best practices guidance at the account and workload level. Alright, that's a wrap for this video, everyone. If you found this helpful and you want to keep improving your AWS knowledge, please make sure you subscribe to our channel, and I'll see you in the next video.